Hi, everybody. Wow. So many people from all over the world. It's great to see.
Hello, hello.
Okay. I just shared my screen. Senna, can you see it? Is it well visible?
Yes, I can
Perfect.
see the slide.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Well, again, hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining. It's really crazy to see such a strong participation and people from all over the world tuning in to discover more about GitHub Copilot. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, I'm Valentin, Senior Solutions Engineer at GitHub. In my role, I basically support enterprises in the German-speaking region to adopt the GitHub platform and, of course, also GitHub Copilot. And I have the distinct pleasure today to talk to you about GitHub Copilot. And with me today is also Senna.
Hey everyone, my name is Senna. I'm also on Valentin's team. I support customers in Northern Europe in the mid-market segment, but really happy to have a discussion with you all in the Q&A at the end, and I'll also be in the chat with Richard and Babu from the GitHub side as well. So thanks everybody for adding where you're from in the chat.
Yeah, it's really great to have such a global community here today with us. And I look forward to seeing you again, because this is only the first part of a 3-part webinar series. You can see the other appointments on the screen, and you will also be able to see them on the website, I think, where you registered for today's event. So we have 2 more sessions coming up. The next one will be really an in-depth demo session where we will show more practical use cases. I will show some today as well, but the next one will really focus on that. And then the 3rd session on December 14th, we'll focus on the future of Copilot and generative AI at GitHub, and have a look at the roadmap and of all the cool things that are coming. I'll tease some of those today. Yeah, so you will have an idea what's coming a bit, but stay tuned for the details, and gonna be really some exciting stuff. And yeah, as Senna mentioned already, we'll have a Q&A at the end. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat already, but we'll also have some time in the end to have a look at those questions. All right, let's get started then. So my session today is called Empowering Human Creativity with AI, because with all the hype around AI in recent months, and by now even already years, I think people focus sometimes almost a little too much on the technology itself and not on what it empowers, which is human creativity, right? In recent months, we've really seen a paradigm shift with AI, right? AI has been in the, let's say, fantasy of everybody for quite some time, but to see it in products in the hands of users and not hidden away somewhere is truly something new, and yeah, really a paradigm shift in information technology, I think. But what sometimes gets pushed aside a little too much, I feel like, is what is really behind all of this, and that is the human intent that AI supports. I think this era that we're now in really is the rise of human intent. Now, what do I mean by that? The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines intent as the state of mind with which an act is done. So it's the state of mind that we're in when we want to accomplish something, when we want to build something, and when we want to make the world a better place, ultimately. And that's something truly human, something really essential to our being, I think. We've always wanted to leave something behind, to build beyond boundaries, and to go to uncharted territory, go where no one else has been before. So I think it's fair to say that the desire to build is fundamentally human. And I'm sure every single one of you has felt that spark of creativity, right? In whichever you field you work, right? Doesn't even matter if you're a dev. I think everyone knows that. When you've solved a problem in an elegant way, when you found a clever solution, it's really what we do as humans. But of course, reality is not so easy, right? Things get in our way. And being biological beings, our daily energy is finite. We can only do so much in a day. So getting that idea out into the world, into code as software developers, sounds easy, but it's really not. Notifications keep popping up. We have to attend meetings, and we also have a private life. Stable Diffusion represents distractions that a software developer has to face in a typical workday like this. And I can really empathize with that, right? Coming from a development background myself, that is really how it can feel, unfortunately. And beyond this normal level of noise, software development itself is operating on an ever bigger scale every single day. We as developers, we want to build faster, bigger, and more secure than ever before. But scaling to such global magnitudes, of course, also comes with a cost. This screenshot of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation landscape represents a fraction of the building blocks found in a modern software architecture, modern cloud native software architecture. And each of these is useful, don't get me wrong, in their own way, and allows us to build at these new scales and more reliably. But it gives you an idea of how many things developers need to keep in mind and consider when building the next big thing today, in addition to this normal everyday level of noise. So the desire to build is fundamentally human, but all of this boilerplate and unnecessary context switching really are not, right? Boilerplate ultimately is the barrier between us as developers and what we're trying to achieve. An everyday boilerplate is preventing someone out there from changing the world. But it's not just boilerplate, because code is fundamentally more. Code is more than syntax, more than endless Google searches, more than remembering that random algorithm you learned in university years or even decades ago, or remembering that random API schema that you need right now in the moment. Code is many more things than the understanding of everyday work that we have today. And I don't mean to get too philosophical here or too hippy-dippy, but the developers of WordPress at Automatic have this nice tagline, code is poetry. And that feels, much closer to the real thing for me personally, right? Feels much more accurate. And I'm sure everybody out there here who joins us today has their own definition. But I'm sure everyone agrees that it's more than fixing that random semicolon on line 527 or remembering a random API endpoint. And that's why we at GitHub believe that everybody out there deserves the best platform for software development, right? Everybody deserves a platform that is inherently secure, that removes friction, that does not get in your way, and that doesn't force you to do context switching. But in addition to that, we believe that also everybody deserves a pair programmer that helps you get your idea, your intent into code. Someone who remembers those random things that you need right now in the moment, but as a human brain, just cannot retain forever, right? As humans, we're really good at generalizing stuff, at having those big picture ideas that really change the world. But our brains are not particularly good at just retaining random pieces of information forever, right? As I mentioned, the API endpoint documentation that you need right now, remembering all of that, we're not so great at that. That's where you write documentation. But what if you had someone next to you who does remember, who can give you that information on the way of getting your idea into code? And that's exactly what we built with GitHub Copilot. So how does that actually work? Right? Let's look a bit under the hood. GitHub Copilot lives in your IDE. It lives where you as a developer really live throughout the day, and most importantly, where your code lives. So just like a human pair programmer, it sees your code in your IDE. It sees the same stuff that you're seeing and can give you suggestions based on that. So Copilot takes the code that it sees in your IDE and from that builds a context. And from that context, it then constructs a prompt, which is sent to an AI model in the cloud. And that AI model generates a suggestion based on that prompt. So for example, in here, we have a piece of Go code, and we have a comment that says, hey, in here, I want to get the average runtime of successful runs in seconds. And we also have a function name here, a return type, and some other information. And that is enough for Copilot to give us an implementation for exactly this use case and suggest it to us in the IDE. And what's really important here is that we stay in charge as developers, right? I can choose to accept that suggestion or accept only parts of it. And of course, once I accepted it, I can also change it, right? So you stay in charge. That's why it's Copilot, not pilot or autopilot. It's really about being an assistant to you. And one important distinction to make here is that with Copilot Business, we don't retain any of your code. We don't retain context, suggestions, prompts. None of that is retained, unlike in Copilot Individuals, where we do use that to improve Copilot. And by the way, with Copilot Enterprise, which is coming in February, we also don't retain anything. But more about that later. Right? Copilot supports various IDEs. We support Visual Studio, NeoVim, VS Code, GitHub Code Spaces, which is based on VS Code, and JetBrains IDEs. And in the future, also more IDEs will be supported because we will enable also communities to build their own Copilot extensions. So the effect of Copilot can really be summarized as follows: maximize developer happiness, increase developer productivity, and accelerate software development. But developer happiness, maximizing that sounds a little bit like a buzzword potentially. So let's dive a bit deeper into that and explore what that actually means. In 2021, we launched at GitHub the Good Day project to find out what makes developers have good days and what makes a good day. And a good day really is a day where at the end of the day, you feel like you accomplished something, right? In the morning, you got up with all that energy and fresh ideas, and you want to put those into your work. And then at the end of the day, ideally, you got the chance to do that and you got the chance to advance on your goals. And we found that interruptions are a major factor in the chances of having a good day. So no or just a few interruptions, the chances of having a good day is pretty high at 82%. But if you're interrupted the majority of the day, this chance drops to 7%. So a huge drop here in the chance of having a good day. So interruptions really are a major factor in not only a good day, but ultimately the productivity of the entire organization. Because if as a developer you cannot focus on your work and get those ideas out, then ultimately what are you doing? Are you having an impact on the organization? At least it will surely be limited. And of course, those interruptions can come from anywhere, right? They can come from having to use tools that are not well integrated, having to context switch, being bothered with meetings and so on, but also from accessing that random piece of information that you need right now during your implementation in software. Harry Edwards from OpenAI summarized it really well when they said, trying to code in an unfamiliar language by Googling everything is like navigating a foreign country with just a phrasebook. And using GitHub Copilot is like hiring an interpreter. And I really love this comparison because just imagine going to a foreign country, having this dictionary, going through it to find what you need right now in this moment while you're in a conversation or while you're trying to, buy a drink or whatever. And rather having someone next to you helping you with that. That's exactly what Copilot is doing, right? You're in your IDE implementing something, maybe talking to an API, to use that example again, and someone's telling you, yeah, that's how this endpoint works. That's how the implementation works in this language. Keep flying, keep implementing that idea rather than having to jump back right into the browser, looking up the documentation. Maybe it has moved. Maybe there's a new version that you didn't know about. All of these things, maybe there's an example, but not one for the language that you're working with. All of these things just take you out of your flow and can really, cascade into a ton of productivity loss and ultimately loss of flow state. Copilot was introduced as a technical preview in June 2021 and then made generally available to developers shortly after, and in fact, way before ChatGPT. And then we made it available to all businesses and organizations in early 2023 in February. Copilot was built at the intersection of the leading innovation and infrastructure in generative AI. OpenAI drives innovation and is the established leader in large language models. Microsoft, on the other hand, provides us with the Azure cloud resources that are proven to scale to meet enterprise demands, global enterprise demands, in fact. And we at GitHub are the home of software development and developer experience. So everybody really brings their best to the table here to create Copilot. So what does that mean from an actual feature point of view, right? So the feature that most of you will probably be most familiar with is code completion, which is generally available and has been for some time. Code completion, as it's in the name, completes your code as you type, right? It can also convert your comments into code, so you can give specific prompts in comments. It can also help you with tests, repetitive code patterns. It can very easily produce boilerplate and fill in those patterns. And it can also show you alternatives and show a list of solutions to use instead of what you currently have. So that's code completion. That's what we got started with. And when that launched, and I saw that for the first time, that was already, really something where something made click in my mind. I was like, wow, yeah, it's intuitive and it's cool to see that now in a product, right? It's just, really, really nice feature. But we shortly after went beyond that because there's so much more to explore. The next thing was Copilot Chat, and that really adds entirely new layers to the experience, really, because you can have a conversation now about your code, and not just a conversation with copy and pasting stuff, but a contextual conversation. And context really is key here, because some might ask, okay, chat, there's this thing called ChatGPT, right? And it's free. Can I just use that? Can I just copy my code in there and just ask ChatGPT to improve it or to, give me an implementation for what I want to do currently? And besides the, privacy and data protection concerns, especially for organizations that you simply don't face with Copilot Business, the context here is really important because obviously you need to switch context to copy that code over. But then again, also, you might just miss some context. Maybe you ask for the explanation of a function by a function call. You just highlight that function call and want an explanation for that. And maybe you miss another piece of context that would be vital to improve that explanation, right? Maybe that function is defined in a different file and called in many other different files. And all of this input would be very helpful, actually, to have an even better explanation. And it's really, you never know what context you miss. So this context is really important, and that's what makes chat so powerful. Because as you might know, talking to an AI and giving it not enough context or not enough prompt really yields, worse results simply. So the more context you have, the more input you have, the better it is. And with chat, you don't need to worry about any of that. Copilot just does all of that for you, and you can just focus on what you're working on. So context-specific coding support, the big thing, explains concepts and specific code blocks. And that is also another layer that's added with chat. Code completion makes you faster, and it shows you alternatives, right? It can also enrich you in that way. But chat makes it really easy to learn stuff and to become a better developer in the sense of truly gaining a deeper understanding of the technologies that you're working with. And I think that's really powerful, right? That's what I really love about GitHub Copilot, that it just doesn't only make me faster, but actually a better developer without me having to consult a ton of resources. I can just, for example, look at a function and maybe I'm wondering what that return type is about. And I can just ask it, hey, what is this return type? How does it behave? Could I maybe use an alternative here? Or maybe my function is raising an exception. And I can ask Copilot if there's maybe a different exception that would be better, or how I can handle exceptions more elegantly here. And I can just keep exploring that. Same with libraries, right? Maybe I want to explore a certain framework deeper, and Copilot Chat is really at my side to help me with that. And of course, I can also reference previous parts of the conversation, right? I don't just always have to start afresh. I can just reference an answer I got earlier, or a question I asked an hour ago, and be like, yeah, about that. Can you give me more info on that? And that's really cool. Finally, it can also help you debugging and remediating vulnerabilities. You can literally just ask it, hey, is there a problem in this file? And it will help you with that as well. The next step we took in expanding Copilot to the entire local development environment is the CLI, which is in public beta just as chat and on its way to GA. The CLI integration meets you in the command line, allows you to get commands. You just tell it to what you want to do on the CLI, and it gives you commands to do that. And most importantly, it also explains them to you again. I will show you all of that shortly, but it's again really focused on also enriching you in knowledge, in understanding those tools better and knowing what you're doing. So what makes Copilot the first overall pick among developers? The Stack Overflow Developer Survey provides really good answers to that. 55% of developers who are using AI coding tools today choose GitHub Copilot. And by the way, second place sits at 13%. And out of the ones who have not tried it yet, 75% want to try it next year. And I think this is really cool because developers obviously are such a great audience for such new tools, right? I mentioned already Copilot was launched quite some time before ChatGPT, and it's just an example how progressive the development community is and how keen it is to explore new technologies and leverage these new benefits that technology can deliver. We're seeing that Copilot enables faster coding by 55%, and honestly, the most important metric for us at GitHub, but also in general, 75% of developers are more fulfilled when using GitHub Copilot. By now, we're seeing that more than 2 million developers are using GitHub Copilot, and it's continually rising. And what's really fun about Copilot is that it's not just very popular among developers, but also among enterprises. It's really a pioneer in enterprise adoption of AI at large. Over 1 in 5 Fortune 500 companies use Copilot today, less than a year since launch. Remember, we launched Copilot Business in February this year. And by now, 37,000 businesses and counting are building software with Copilot. And we have some examples here of companies that are using Copilot. And it's great to see that it's really all kinds of companies, right? It's huge companies, it's startups, it's really well-established companies, and also really fast-moving younger companies, technology companies, and so on. And that's because developer productivity with Copilot is not just about speed. It's really about enriching you by allowing you to spend less mental effort on repetitive tasks. We're seeing that 87% of developers report this. You spend less time searching, 77% report this. And finally, 73% say that they're more in the flow. So it's just reducing the cognitive load on developers and thus making everybody happier and more productive, of course. And this really benefits enterprises, right? It results in a faster completion of tasks and therefore in a higher release cycle agility. But it's also very much an HR topic because developer onboarding just becomes much easier because you can just get started on code bases that you're not familiar with and also technologies, frameworks that you don't know yet much, much faster. And of course, developer retention is also higher because, as I mentioned, the cognitive load is simply lower and you can just focus on what's fun about development and not on the tedious stuff. And in addition, it's also a really useful tool for attracting developers, right? Especially in today's labor market, it's important to just offer the best tools available for developers, right? And honestly, if I was to, evaluate a job proposal now, and the company wouldn't allow me to use generative AI tools in my job, I would turn that offer down because I just know by now how much cognitive load Copilot takes off of my mind and how much faster I can fly at the speed of thought with Copilot. So yeah, attracting developers also very much something that Copilot supports you in. And the CTO of Duolingo summarized the impact on enterprises again really well by saying that a tool like GitHub Copilot is so impactful at large companies because suddenly engineers can make impactful changes to other developers' code with little previous exposure. And that's, funnily, very much in line with also our internal goals at GitHub. Internally, we have this beacon that a new developer who joins on day one should be empowered to push a meaningful change securely and reliably into production. And Copilot is an important puzzle piece in that, right? Of course, the platform, GitHub Advanced Security, GitHub Code Spaces are also big enablers, but Copilot is definitely vital to this idea. And we see that it's supporting exactly such fast-moving onboarding journeys in other companies as well. And it goes beyond onboarding, really. It goes through the entire tenure, of course, because in your career journey as a developer, it's very likely that you will eventually encounter new code bases and new technologies, new languages, new frameworks, all of this stuff. Software development is moving so quickly, and even in more established languages, you will eventually find new things. And with Copilot, it's just so much easier to get started with those, to really learn by doing, right? That's definitely how I learned the best, to just have an example and pick it apart and get explanations on it with someone next to me who knows all the detail. And that's Copilot. All right, now that concludes my slides for now. I have a few more things to say later, but firstly, now I would like to go into a demo and show you Copilot in action. So I'm just gonna stop my screen sharing here and open my IDE to show you how you can prompt Copilot very effectively and how you interact with it. So I'm just gonna open my VS Code and share my screen momentarily.
Hey, Valentin, we actually have a question that has been asked a few times, I think. So yeah, we talk a little bit about the different flavors of GitHub Copilot. Some people are interested to see, like, how can we summarize what's available in the different plans ever since we talked about the Copilot Enterprise at Universe. Do we have a summary slide about this? Or if not, I can just pop a link in the chat where we talk about this.
We have a great summary on the product page where you can compare the plans. So that's definitely a good resource. But I can also sum it up quickly. Basically, the difference between Copilot Individuals, Copilot Business, and Copilot Enterprise, which is our new plan, is that with Copilot Business, you get enterprise-grade policy management, enterprise-grade security and privacy. As I mentioned, one vital part is that we do not retain any code when you use Copilot Business. That's really the main difference to Copilot Individuals. And we also have additional legal support. So you get a defense of third-party claims, legal indemnity when you use Copilot. So that's, again, another vital part And yeah, that will be just expanded in the future, right? The policy management and all that good stuff. We are already using it so that you can easily manage, for example, betas and previews. And with Copilot Enterprise, I don't want to say too much because we have, exciting stuff to come in the coming sessions. So definitely join those for all the spicy details. But in a nutshell, Copilot Enterprise will enable you to leverage your internal information and just, really fine-tune Copilot so that's even more useful. And it will also add more features. But I have a bit of coming also for that. So stay tuned for that. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my VS Code with you guys. Just a second. Okay, there we are. Okay, yeah, that's looking good. Perfect. So what I have here is an empty repository, almost empty. I have a Python file in here and a JSON file, which I want to process with my Python code. And really having nothing in here, we can quickly go over how Copilot looks like from a UI perspective. Down here, I have the Copilot icon, which just shows me that Copilot is active. And it also disappears and turns into a loading or a buffering symbol when Copilot is thinking, so that I have a good idea whether Copilot is currently doing something and generating something for me. In addition, I also have Copilot Chat installed here on the left. I can also open Copilot Chat inline using Control-I. We will see that also in a bit. And I also have Copilot Labs installed here, which just contains a few experimental functionality for anyone excited to try some experimental stuff. You can install that as a separate extension. So the really most important thing when working with Copilot is, again, keeping in mind that you need to communicate your intent, right? Think also of a human looking at this file and having to understand what it's supposed to do. So when you start with something fresh, it's really good to initially communicate what you want to do using a comment. So I'm going to say here, this file processes talks.json, which is the other file in this repository. And you can see Copilot already goes ahead and gives me a suggestion here. We call this gray cursive text also ghost code, right? That's the suggestion that Copilot is giving me. And it suggests to convert the data into CSV data and write it to a file, talks.csv. I can accept that suggestion entirely by pressing Tab, or I can also accept it word by word, right, with Control and the right arrow key. And in this case, we also got multiple suggestions. So we have 3 suggestions here, and I can cycle through them. And yeah, for example, here it says, hey, maybe you want to output a list of talks to be displayed. So you can also see these alternatives. If a suggestion maybe doesn't exactly do what you want, you can try those. Now, in this case, I just wanted to specify my initial intent, so I'm not going to take any of these and just move to a new line instead. You can see just by moving to a new line, Copilot also starts generating new suggestions for me. In this case, it suggests to import this JSON library from the Python standard lib to use that later, I guess, to process the data, which sounds reasonable, so I'm just going to take that suggestion. Next, it actually suggests a comment, so a use case kind of, to read in the JSON file. And that makes definitely sense, right? I want to have the data available for processing later. So I'm just going to take that, and subsequently, it's giving me also an implementation on how to do that, right? It's opening the file, and then it's reading the data using the library imported previously. So I'm just going to rename that from data to talks, actually, to make it a little more readable. As I've said before, you can adapt these suggestions to what you want, what you need, make it more readable, just change what it does. You stay in charge, you decide what ends up in your file, and of course also what gets committed and eventually merged into your project. All right, and we can just keep going, and Copilot keeps suggesting us new things that we might want to implement. This is actually particularly interesting, I found, when implementing APIs, for example, because there just keeps giving me endpoint implementations, for example, and it really nicely autofills those things. So that would be another example where this autofilling also of use cases and then subsequently code works really well. So that's really cool. But I don't want to create a list of speakers. I'm actually going to write a function name because you don't always have to write comments. You can also use very descriptive function names. And of course, that's really something that you would want to do in general when working in a team, working with fellow brains, be it artificial or biological or human. You want to make it really readable, even for yourself, right? Eventually, in 1 or 2 years, you might open that file and wonder what stuff is doing. And a readable function name, descriptive function name helps a lot with that. So I'm just going to define a new function here and call it filter talks by tag. And Copilot is giving me a implementation for that based just on the function name. So I'm just going to take that, quickly walk through it. So it's giving me a parameter tag, which is the one I'm going to filter by, another comment here, and then it's using a list comprehension here to iterate over the talks. And for each talk, it's checking whether the given tag parameter appears in the current talks tags, and then it returns that. I'm going to do that again with another function name. So in this case, it's suggesting, hey, maybe you want to do the same by year. I'm going to just say, hey, I want to pretty print my talks because JSON data on the command line doesn't look so nice. So I'm just going to give that as a function name. And again, Copilot picks that up and gives me an implementation for that. So it iterates over the talks again, and for each talk, it prints a few attributes of each talk, and then it ends with a new line to make it even more readable. So that's really all that you need to consider when you're working with Copilot. Try to communicate your intent. Think again of a human sitting next to you and having to figure out what you want to do in this file to give you an implementation. That's really all you need to keep in mind when working with it. And of course, ultimately, that makes it also more readable for you later on, or for your team, or for a reviewer who has to check out what you want to merge. So yeah, it really encourages, I think, also good coding practice here. Now, I'm going to actually make a little change here because it's just giving each attribute, on one line. Maybe we can make that even prettier. And I'm going to ask Copilot chat here in line to change this function to print the attributes separated with commas and see what Copilot can come up with for that. Let's see what happens. All right. And yeah, it's giving me this really cool diff view right here in the file where I can see what this would basically result in if I was to accept the suggestion. So I'm just going to hit that button here and yeah, have it added to the file. So this is also how you can interact with Copilot Chat right in line and get those suggestions and adapt what it gave you previously, what you've implemented yourself. All of that you can do right in here. Now I want to show you another thing. I'm just going to open another instance of VS Code for that and show you another use case with Copilot Chat, and that is an entirely new workspace, right? We've already started working in an empty repo, and now I want to get a head start on my project with an implementation to get started with. So I'm just going to share my screen again, just a second. Okay. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, looks good. Okay, cool. Now I have an empty folder here, and what I want to do in here is to create an entirely new workspace. And for that, I'm going to hop to the chat window here on the left, and I can give a natural language prompt, just ask it something in the chat directly, or I can also use shortcuts here. We have these / commands that contain often used commands so that you don't always have to type them. For example, explain here is something that people often use, or fix, or new, which is what I'm going to use, so that you don't always have to write a full natural language prompt for that and can just do it quickly in here as you're in your flow state. So what I want to do is I want to write an API server in Python using fast API and talking to a bit of a more complex prompt. Let's see what Copilot can come up with to get me a head start on this project. And it's now thinking, using this macro that I gave it, and giving me a directory structure for this prompt. So it's suggesting to create quite a few files here in a folder structure and allowing me to create it directly. So I'm just going to hit that button, select the current folder to create it in, and it just now goes ahead and goes over all of these files and populates them with code. And note here, by the way, that it's not just generating Python code, it's also generating, for example, a requirements.txt file and a markdown file. So Copilot is not limited to a specific set of languages. It can really work with any language. One thing here to consider is only that languages that are very popular, where there's a lot of public training data for that, will get more or more elaborate suggestions, whereas languages that are not as popular or just very old might get a bit less, simply because there's less training data for the AI model to use here. But it can work with anything, and it can also generate a manifest file and other things. We've even seen it, that was very interesting, with an industry customer in Germany, where it worked with a language that simply doesn't exist out there in the open, right? It's proprietary language they use for firmwares internally. And yeah, we saw just pick that up on the fly and give suggestions, meaningful suggestions in that project. And it was really cool to see it work with something it has never seen before. So it really has a deeper understanding of software development and consequently can work really with any language. And you can also generate test data, work in YAML files, for example, JSON files, and so on. So that's something to keep in mind here. What I find also really cool about chat are these follow-up questions that it gives me here, right? For example, it's suggesting, hey, maybe you want to know how you can install these dependencies now in your Python project. Maybe if I'm relatively new to Python, this would be really helpful. And it keeps giving me also these suggested questions. So that's really something that I like about Copilot Chat, because it facilitates that continuous learning journey, right? It doesn't just stop at one. It actually prompts me also, hey, you asked about this. Maybe you would be interested also in exploring a certain other topic a bit deeper that is relevant to the question you asked previously. And I've definitely used it quite a few times to explore topics and found myself really enjoying that much more than if I had to, jump to another resource and then hop again somewhere else to get that additional detail. So having it all integrated here and having that knowledge right where I'm in my flow state, right where it meets me, is really cool. All right, now we're almost done. Again, it goes through all of these files, so it takes a little longer than just the code completion that we've seen previously. So bear with me, but once we're in there, I just want to show you one or two more things, inspect the code quickly to see what it has come up with. And by the way, it also created also a test here. That's also cool. Personally, I don't love writing tests so much, so that's really nice. And also a model. I actually didn't give it a data or kind of data that I want to work with, an object, so to speak, that my API is supposed to return or to create or to update. So I'm curious what it gave me here. All right, we're at README, so we're almost there. I implemented a project like this a few months ago, by the way, without Copilot, right? I went through the documentation, just learned about Fast API, learned about MongoDB, really from the ground up. And it was an interesting experience because it took me, I think days to just get a really comprehensive working example with which I could then go on and learn by doing. But with Copilot Chat, it's just so much faster. And it was really cool experience that, within a minute or so, I can just have this up and running and keep going with it. So let's check it out. We have a few API routes here. Okay, yeah, it came up with an items endpoint here, so I can create, update, delete items and get them, of course. Yeah, we also have models for this. It's cool. And here in main, let's see. Yeah, it's setting up the database connection on startup and disconnects it on shutdown. And then in here, we have the database connection. Okay, that's cool. Now I want to actually change a little thing about this database connection because it's actually not an asynchronous one, right? I don't want to get into too much technical detail here, but with an asynchronous one, I can just get a much better performance in this particular application that I'm creating. So it would be good to have an asynchronous database connection rather than a synchronous one. So having opened that file, I'm just going to ask Copilot, can you adapt this file to use an async database connection and make all necessary changes and see what it tells me. It's already mentioning here, okay, I'm using that reference that you've opened, right, the mongodb.py file here, so that's cool. And it's thinking about my prompt, so let's see what it comes up with. What I find, by the way, really nice about Copilot Chat also is when you ask it for a code sample, it always goes through what it's doing in natural language first, so that you really have a good chance to understand what's happening here. So in fact, to use an async database connection here, I need to use a different library. I need to use a different MongoDB driver, which is called Motor instead of the PyMongo driver. And it then tells me, okay, first you need to import the necessary modules, right? This one instead of PyMongo. You need to change the client that you're using to the Motor client and then update the individual methods in here to use the async versions of these methods. And then finally, I need to use the async and await keywords when necessary, because that's just how it works with async in Python. And then I get the adapted code. And it's just giving me new implementations here of each of these operations using the new library. And finally, right, it's also noting that I need, of course, to install this package if I want to use the new library. So I cannot just import it. I need to actually have it installed. So it's giving me the pip command here as well. And yeah, I can just go ahead, copy that to the clipboard. I can also insert it into a new file, or I can just go ahead and insert it at my cursor, thereby replacing the existing code. And yeah, really just keep going with that. All right, so another example of how you can get really well started with a full directory structure with Copilot Chat in just a minute, and then also use prompts to really change bigger sections of code and make meaningful changes to your application. Now I want to show you one more thing on the CLI, how that works, right? How that's integrated. So I'm just gonna hop to my terminal here, go ahead and share that with you. Okay. Yeah, there we are, cool. Right, so Copilot CLI is integrated with the existing official GitHub CLI. So it's another subcommand for that. What I did here in my terminal is I added a little shortcut with just 2 question marks, which is then alias to GH Copilot suggests. So whenever I type the 2 question marks, this is what actually happens in the background. So, it's just faster. And with that, I can just ask it, for example, to do something that I regularly forget, to work with media files with FFmpeg, right? Some of you might know that it's a command line tool to work with media files, and you can just manipulate them, extract stuff, maybe extract an audio layer and stuff like that. So what I want to do is I want to extract the subtitle track of a media file with FFmpeg and just see what Copilot can come up with for that. And it gives me this command here, right? Nicely formatted also in the CLI. And I can also get more information on this. I can revise it. I can also give my feedback. So if you work with that, please do. Helps us a lot. And I can get an explanation for this. And again, this goes back to the point of not just making me faster, but actually also making me a better developer, making me understand more. And here's now a detailed explanation of what's happening, right? It's using the FFmpeg command line tool, right? It's specifying an input file. And then it's providing a map here, which maps the first subtitle stream from the input to the output file, right? And then 0 here refers to the first input file and so on. So that's really a detailed explanation that I can use. And finally, I can just go ahead, copy that command to the clipboard, copy it in here, and keep going with that. That's Copilot on the CLI. And another thing you can do, of course, is not just have suggestions, but you can also have existing commands explained. So for example, I can some basic example here with, not with the GH actually, that was my mistake, sorry about that. I want to make a git commit, not a GH commit. Do that, and yeah, there we have it. Git commit, of course, the M flag is used to specify the commit message. So if you forget stuff like that, or for Git flags that you use less regularly, you can get an explanation also here rather than having to come up with a natural language prompt. All right. So that's it for my demos. I'm just going to hop back to the slides. And again, if you want to see more demos, make sure to join the next session where we have many more in-depth use cases. All right, yeah, that's looking good. Okay. So let's sum it up again. Developer productivity with Copilot means focusing on what's fun and what also matters most, getting your ideas into code, spending less time on tedious tasks. So more time on creative thinking, more time on the fun part of developing, less time on tedious stuff like searching documentation, finding vulnerabilities, correcting syntax, all that nasty stuff. But we're not stopping there. We're not stopping at the local development environment. We're taking Copilot beyond the IDE, beyond the local developer environment. And that means that we're enhancing the entire software development lifecycle with Copilot, with AI. And that means taking it to the GitHub platform. And we'll have a look at how the platform is evolving with AI also in the next session. But before, I would like to share another aspect of this new era of Copilot, which is also leveraging more sources of knowledge in the future through Copilot. Knowledge really is the center of Copilot, right? All of the training data that trains the AI model, that ultimately helps it to basically use the collective wisdom of all software development to give you meaningful suggestions. And GitHub being the home of software development and open source on the web, we have all of this public code, which is an invaluable source of knowledge that Copilot puts right at your fingertips. But there are, of course, sources of knowledge that Copilot cannot leverage yet. For example, think of the countless lines of code that exist in companies and organizations around the world that are not public, right? From custom coding conventions to business logic, proprietary languages, like the industry customer example that I had previously, or uncommon techniques and scenarios, there's a lot more knowledge for Copilot to make even better suggestions for you. And beyond code, of course, documentation is also a great resource that even contains knowledge beyond software. Right? It might tell you how to handle certain situations in your organization, like how do I get my company device repaired, or how to procure and deploy certain technology that differs from the generic public way of doing things. Right? Imagine wanting to deploy a cloud resource in Azure. And if you ask Copilot about it today, it will give you the standard correct public way of doing things. But inside your organization, you might need to take different or extra steps. Perhaps you need to use a custom resource, you need to get in touch with a certain team, or you need to procure it through some kind of internal marketplace. And then finally, beyond public code, documentation, and internal resources inside your organization, we are also creating a partner ecosystem, enabling third-party vendors to connect their services and data sources to Copilot. So how do we enable organizations to give their members fast and easy access to all of this knowledge through AI without having to go open source? The answer is Copilot Enterprise, which was announced at GitHub Universe beginning of November and which will launch in February 2024. It expands Copilot's capabilities from the local dev environment to the platform, and you'll also be able to use the full context of your enterprise's code base and documentation to personalize Copilot across the developer workflow. So wrapping up, developer experience makes the difference today. Every organization is a software organization these days, and therefore developer experience decides how productive an organization is and how it operates, right? Faster time to revenue, improved operational efficiency, higher talent retention and attraction, all of these are dictated by developer experience, by a good developer experience. And developer experience, right? The next step in that truly is AI. McKinsey found that developers using generative AI-based tools are more than twice as likely to report overall happiness, fulfillment, and a state of flow, which, as we've seen previously, contributes to productivity and to having a good day, ultimately. Wrapping it up with one final quote from the SVP of technology at Mercado Libre, the Amazon of the Latin American region, said that with GitHub Copilot, I think the possibilities for unlocking innovation are dramatic. And thinking of the many millions of developers all around the world who fly at the speed of their minds with Copilot and bring their ideas to life makes me very hopeful about the future and what we'll be able to achieve as humanity. So I'm excited to join you on your AI journey, see what you'll build and achieve with Copilot as we shape our future based on conscious, thoughtful, empathetic, and reflected intent. And don't forget to join the next session on December 7th, where we'll explore use cases and do a deep dive into more demos of Copilot and how it can help you. So don't forget to join the next session and the one after that, and I look forward to seeing all of you there. All right, so that leaves room for some questions. I've already seen a ton of activity in chat. That's lovely. That's so great. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for investing your time and energy here with us. Really appreciate it. And yeah, let's see if there are some questions that we can talk about now in the chat.
Yes, thank you so much, Valentin. Yeah, this has been one of the more active chats I've seen in one of these webinars. So I tried to add up some of the ones that are more themes that a lot of people seem to be asking. Thanks for covering the Copilot Enterprise plan, like that announcement at the end, because there were a few questions around like, what about training it on my private code base or like my company's specific conventions? So if you go to the github.com/features/Copilot link that we've shared in the chat, you can learn more about that and like what is different in the plans. And there seems to be, there are a lot of questions about context. So Valentin, I was wondering if you could touch on again, like, does Copilot have the entire project's code as context, or is it certain tabs? I know you were showing workspace as well, but maybe clarifying that for folks.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've also seen another question about which AI model we actually use in the background. That is slightly related, so I will try to touch on both of those. You saw me in the first example opening or having opened the talks.json separately, and that's a tip that I can give for you for now, because indeed for now Copilot considers those first, but we are expanding that. So we're expanding that to the entire repository, and of course with Copilot Enterprise also leveraging the entire enterprise code base. So we are gradually expanding that. And also the AI model, the evolution of large language models really helps us here, because the more they evolve, the more we can also put into them, the more context we can provide to them to give us those better suggestions. And that's why indeed I saw, I think, some comment talking about which GPT version. Initially we launched with GPT-3, then shortly after 3.5 Turbo, and now we are on GPT-4. On for chat at least, and moving also to GPT-4 for other parts of Copilot. So we're really, on the verge of innovation here, and keep moving to provide you with the best experience here. Of course, it's always also balance, because as you might know, the more complex these models get, the longer they can also take for suggestions. So sometimes we need to make improvements to get the turbo version first, or something like that, to scale it to all the GitHub users out there, so that everybody has a very low latency experience, because that's important to flow state. You don't want to wait a minute or so for a suggestion to appear, just for an extreme example. Yeah, so that's what I can share for that.
Cool. Another question we've got a lot is, there's a lot of excitement about JetBrains IDE support, and a lot of questions about when can I use it for JetBrains, when can we have Copilot chat there. It seems like there was a beta. So something I can share too is that it's currently in private beta, so our customers are using JetBrains chat today. We're gathering feedback about it, and this is also meant to open up to a more public beta shortly in December. So just wanted to share that you should be able to get access to this pretty soon. And yeah, there's also some questions too about language support. So Valentine, you mentioned that some customers that you see, even their own languages that maybe they have like context open and other tabs, they're able to see Copilot give them some suggestions that are meaningful to them as well. Can you comment at all about like quality of support for just different languages represented on GitHub, like Python, C++, C#, JavaScript, and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. So the more training data we have for a certain language, the better the suggestions will be, generally speaking. What's very interesting here is to take the State of the Octaverse report into account, because that represents how fast certain languages are evolving on the platform and which are the most popular languages. So I think currently it's JavaScript on the first place, then Python on third, and IAC, so infrastructure as code, is heavily growing. So Terraform, the HashiCorp configuration language, is growing very fast. So all of these factors influence, of course, how much training data there is and how much info there is on these languages. We have always one famous example used in many of these sessions, where one example for a less well-represented language is COBOL, which is heavily used still in the financial sector. I think our CEO Thomas also made a blog post about that, how basically the world's financial sector, the world's financial infrastructure relies on this super old language that few developers today really work with intuitively and well. So that would be an example where, for example, Copilot Enterprise, of course, would help a lot, where you can add this existing code base, fine-tune Copilot with that, and then use that to give also more meaningful suggestions for these languages. Another example would be very new languages, such as V. Maybe some of you heard of that, where we also don't have much training data, simply because there's not such a big community. And for that, again, of course, this fine-tuning would help as well. So the State of the Octaverse is maybe a good idea to check out, just to see what's popular on GitHub at large, and then consequently influences the training base that we have.
Yeah, thanks for that. And somebody also asked, kind of related, if it supports Terraform. So just to add, yes, it supports Terraform. I know people that use it for Terraform. I also have used it a few times to write GitHub Actions YAML files. So really like any type of file that you need to write some code in, you should definitely try it out. It should be pretty helpful for you there. Other questions? Oh, sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I saw one question that I wanted actually to touch upon in my slides and forgot, but that's very important. The question was whether you need to have your code on GitHub to work with Copilot. And the answer is you don't. For what I've shown you, for Copilot Business, for all of these features, it doesn't matter at all where your code is. So in fact, it doesn't even have to be on any Git repository. It can just be a local folder. As long as it's in your IDE and Copilot can see it, you can work with Copilot, and yeah, no worries there. When it comes to fine-tuning your code and features that are coming with Copilot Enterprise, which are integrated into the GitHub platform that transcend beyond your local IDE, that's of course another story, because if that's tightly integrated with a certain GitHub service, for example, then of course you can only use that in GitHub. But for Copilot itself, for Copilot Business, for chat, CLI, and the IDE integration, doesn't matter at all where your code is and if you have a repository on GitHub at all.
Somebody also asked if they can prompt Copilot using, like with the natural language prompts, can they use a different language? I've personally had success like trying to prompt it to do something in Turkish. Do you use it for any other languages yourself, like German, for example? Have you tried that?
Yeah, indeed. I have actually worked in German with it as well. And yeah, works well. So, I mean, same as also other GPT-based tools. Yeah, works well, definitely.
There were some questions too about editors that we support. I know you had a slide open there, but just to remind folks, we have support today for JetBrains, Visual Studio, VS Code, and NeoVim IDEs. I'm not missing anything there, right?
I don't think so, no. Visual Studio, VS Code, GitHub Codespaces, JetBrains, NeoVim. Yeah, that's good. I saw also some questions about further IDE support, like I think Eclipse was mentioned and Xcode. And yeah, those are great questions, and we understand that, of course, people working in other IDEs want to use this as well. As GitHub, as a company, we're focusing on bringing a really stellar experience to a select set of IDEs currently, which includes the ones I've mentioned previously. But we still want to enable you to use it also in other IDEs. That means that we will publish also basically an SDK for communities to integrate Copilot into other IDEs, so that other communities can use it as well and can provide support for other IDEs. I think actually some people already reverse engineered Copilot and build a custom integration for Xcode. If maybe that's, yeah, I didn't see it myself, but I heard of that. So there's definitely a lot of demand. People are investing already energy into that. And of course, being the home of open source, we would love to support that. And yeah, that's our approach here, because we would rather have this stellar experience in a few IDEs rather than a mediocre experience in a ton of IDEs. But of course, yeah, community support is amazing. So yeah, definitely support for that. Can we get an enterprise discount if we send proof of getting a Copilot logo tattoo? I'm afraid not, but you will get my eternal love and respect. That's for sure.
I'm excited to see the tattoos come out with the new Copilot logo. A question that I just answered with a link to a blog post is, and there are a few like this as well, are there some magic and prompts, or is it just a helper to make shorter questions? I just shared a blog post. I responded to Igor's question here with some tips and tricks on how to write better prompts for Copilot. And we are also going to be covering this in the next session that we have, I believe next week. So stay tuned, and we'll go into a few more details about just some ways that you can give it more context and hopefully get some more accurate responses from it.
I also saw one question about basically who owns Copilot generated code, who has the intellectual property for that. And the answer is you. So we don't assume any ownership of the code that Copilot suggests for you. And we also have features in place that ensure that code is checked whether it matches any open source code, for example, that might be under GPL, right? That would be a license that could be problematic for proprietary use cases. So there's a filter for that, the legal indemnity, and of course we don't assume any ownership in that. So yeah, it's firmly yours.
Oh, Max asked, can Copilot write a commit message based on changes? And I'm wondering, Valentine, have you seen that? There seems to be a new like plugin in VS Code where you can actually generate that. Have you used that yet?
I haven't used it myself, but I have seen it. It's basically this little star button that you can see in VS Code, and it just generates a commit message for you. That is a bit in line with also similar features that are coming with Copilot Enterprise that we'll touch upon in detail in the next sessions, where we want to take the friction not only out of coding, but also out of getting your stuff merged, right? Because implementing is only part of the puzzle, of course. You need to push it into a pull request, which will then get merged into your main branch, reviewed, approved, and so on. And we want to make that much easier as well. So there's definitely a lot of exciting features coming here as well, and we can share more details about that in the next session. Someone also asked about translating code with Copilot. So yeah, Copilot Chat can definitely help with that. That's in fact also a use case we often see in enterprises where they want to modernize software architectures, and Copilot Chat can help a lot with that as well. It can also help with questions like which architecture we should use, but of course you need to provide a lot of context.
I think we're actually at time. We've hit 6 o'clock in the evening here, or
yeah,
I think it's 10 o'clock in the US or noon. But thank you all so much for all of these engaging chats. I think I actually haven't seen this many questions in a webinar in Goldcast before. And thank you so much, Valentine, for the presentation and the demonstration. That was all really helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you also so much from my part, and see you in the next sessions.
Yeah, hopefully see you all in the next session. All right, have a great day or evening. See you all later.
Take care.